Hello everyone, this is a lecture on walking you through how to create a decision matrix or selection matrix, which is your homework assignment for this week. So there is a 6-step process and we have already completed step 1. So a description of the decision matrix is a chart that allows a team or an individual to systematically identify, analyze, and rate the strength of relationships between sets of information. The matrix is especially useful for looking at large numbers of decision factors and assessing each factor's relative importance. We use it when we select a project, evaluate alternative solutions to problems, and also design remedies or solutions to problems. So the assumptions of the decision model are 1, problem clarity. The decision maker is assumed to have complete information regarding the decision situation. Now this is what your lit review was. This allowed you to have complete information. So that lit review table should have given you complete information to set yourself up for this process. Known options to identify all the relevant criteria and list viable alternatives. We'll be walking through that today. A clear preference, the criteria and alternatives will be ranked using a weighted system that I'll talk about in this matrix. Constant preferences, the criteria are constant and the weights assigned to them are stable over time. No time or cost constraints for the matrix specification, and maximum payoff. So this is the assumptions here on how we're making our decision to solve our wicked problem. So the 6-step rational decision-making model is 1, to define the problem. This is what you've done already with your statement of the problem as well as with your lit review table. And then what we're going to spend the time doing this week is to generate alternatives, identify the decision criteria, weight the criteria, rate each alternative on each criterion, and then compute the optimal decision. So these almost look like little pun squares from your biology class as we're looking at the different issues and trying to create, some solutions to problems. All right, so step 1, identify the problem. So at this point, the statement of the problem and the lit review, you have explored this step thoroughly. You have the statement of the problem paper, you have your analysis sheet, you have your fact sheet, and you have your lit review table. And all of these things so far are leading you up to this assignment. So you'll combine this information first to create a robust statement of the problem introduction to your midpoint paper. So you're simply, for the first part of your paper, for the midpoint paper, you're just going to collect all the information that you have so far and place it right in the beginning of this paper that you'll be writing for mid-semester. Second, you're going to be generating some alternatives. So as you can see here, in generation of alternatives, you want to make sure that you're listing alternatives first. Just what are all the other things that could happen? We could do nothing to solve the problem, or these are some of the other ways we could solve the problem. And then you might need to redefine the problem if necessary here. I've given a lot of you some advice on this in terms of narrowing. So when you wrote your statements of the problem, I discussed, narrowing your frame of reference a little bit. This is a place where you might want to, allow for that. So here's an example. You could translate your goal into some objectives. So objectives are going to be more concrete statement about desired end states with timetables, target populations, and resource limits. So for example, instead of saying, I'm going to reduce childhood obesity, you can say, I'm going to reduce the prevalence of childhood obesity in children K to 12 in Birmingham, Alabama by 10% in 2020 with the resources currently available in the Jefferson County Department of Health. So therefore, all your alternatives have to do with the resources that are available at the Jefferson County Department of Health, and it really limits that scope rather than looking at all the different ways that you could do that, Consider what will happen if no action is taken. That's going to be your baseline. Consider how effective any different alternative would be at changing the status quo. And so some common pitfalls that you might run into as you're generating the alternatives you include too much reliance on your past experiences, personal, rather than being really objective, too early closure on your problem definition, rather than, really narrowing that topic so then you can generate 3 to 7 alternatives that are really specific. Set a policy preference too soon, and just like go with it before the alternatives are known. So really give yourself a chance to think about these alternatives. Failure to consider and capture new ideas and insights. Self-censoring new ideas as they're offered. So make sure you keep an open mind. And this is why I put the video last week about, just kind of dreaming big and thinking outside the box. So, let yourself, explore some of these different options. You might have some ideas even when you first came into this class about what you wanted to do to solve your problem, but really let yourself see this with, an open mind. And then also ruling out alternatives too early. So just saying, nope, not gonna do this alternative, not gonna work, just really give yourself a chance to sit and think about it. And failure to reconsider discarded alternatives if conditions change. So let's say there's more resources available at the Jefferson County Department of Health, then you might need to change some of these things that haven't worked in the past because there's money available or staff available that could implement something that wasn't necessarily implemented before. So next, you're going to create a matrix with the alternatives. So you're going to set up a matrix with 3 columns over here that are blank, and then some alternatives. I'm going to say a minimum of 3 alternative solutions. So 1 is going to be your solution to the wicked problem, and then other alternatives are going to be other solutions to the wicked problem. So think about different things that can be done based on your new statement of the problem with the narrowed focus. So next, you're going to identify some selection criteria. So these are some different options for selection criteria. There are so many to choose from. I want you to just think about somewhere between 3 to 5 criteria that really resonate with you, your personal problem, your ability to solve that problem. Are you going to solve it? What level of the ecological model are you addressing, and kind of stick with that? Are you looking at education? Are you looking at broad policy change? What are you looking at there? So just kind of think about, merit and effectiveness could be one, economic feasibility, technical implementation feasibility. So how realistic is this? Political and sociocultural feasibility, administrative feasibility, potential for benefits and risks, and then ethical concerns. So these are some criteria you might want to use. In your instructions in the assignment, I go into a lot of detail in each of those, and so just make sure you're walking through and thinking about which criteria are most appropriate for your wicked problem. And then add them to the matrix. So in your very first column over here, put the criteria and then list them. So next, we're going to use the criteria and the alternative policies to create a scoring system. And this scoring system is what you're going to be using to write your midpoint paper here. You're going to assign weights to these different criteria and alternatives. So if we're looking at criteria 1, say it's sociocultural feasibility, maybe that's a weight of 2. Maybe ethical concerns and, following the law and, making sure you're taking care of the people you're working with, maybe that's a weight of 3. And then maybe the cost benefit is a weight of 1, right? So, think about which are going to make the biggest impact in terms of, the weights. And, you might want to talk with your partners that you've established that have similar problems and kind of walk through this as a team. A lot of times in the field, this is done as a team problem. So, you can walk through each of those criteria and think about which weights you'd want to assign to them. And then you design the scoring system. So you score 1 through 5. This is what I just walked through on that last on the last slide there. So really just determine the scoring range. And as I said, you can do that alone. You can ask me about, walking through that and how to figure out that scoring range, or you can work with somebody who has a similar problem to you and walk through it together as a team. And step 5, you're gonna set the ratings, right? So we have alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 3. Is that going to improve? Is that going to not change? Or is that going to, get worse, right? So we have a baseline score of 0, right? We can see alternative 1, criteria 1, improves. Alternative 2, nothing happens. Alternative 3, improves, right? And then we walk through that for each of those different criteria. And then lastly, you make your decision based on those scores. And then this is how you're going to determine, this is how you want to solve your wicked problem. So as you can see here, we have the criteria, the baselines, and the weights. And obviously here, alternative 3 came out with a +6, alternative 2 a -2, and alternative 1 only a 1. So we're going to, maybe change our solution to our wicked problem and say, that in terms of cost benefit, in terms of, ethical issues, in terms of sociocultural feasibility, we're really gonna, maybe address this alternative 3 and think about that implementation instead of alternative 1 that might have been your original plan. So that's how we set it up in terms of the decision-making matrix. As you hop into your assignment, make sure that you read closely. Your homework for this week is to do the decision-making matrix, use that plus your statement of the problem and your lit review table and your fact sheet to create a midterm paper that will then go into your final paper. You'll just be revising this and adding on a little bit more for your final paper at the end of the semester. So the better this is, the better you'll be set up. And then you'll be doing a 10-minute presentation, just walking through your whole process so far and submitting that as well. So make sure you read everything closely, get in touch with me if you have any questions, and good luck to all of you. I look forward to seeing these at the end of the month.